Let's talk about Doomsday, folks. Let's get into it. Welcome back to my channel. Hope everyone is doing well out there. And today we're going to talk about the film Doomsday. Yes, this movie came out March 14th of 2008. I was living in Arizona at the time, and I was lucky enough to see this in the theaters. It's rated R. It's an hour and 45 minutes long. Had a budget of $20 to $30 million, and upon release, it made, sadly, only 11 in the U.S. and 22 worldwide. Now, this film was on my radar back then because Neil Marshall wrote and directed this film, and he had just coming off of Dog Soldiers and The Descent. As a matter of fact, that's how he got this film, because The Descent was really highly regarded, and it made a lot of money, and Universal signed him to do this film, which is his biggest budgeted film until this point in his career. And Rona Murta is in here as Eden Sinclair. She had done some character work up until this point. She was in Sweet Home Alabama, and the reason I know that is because that movie is my wife's favorite movie, and I've seen it dozens of times. And then she went on after this to do Underworld, Rise of the Lycans, and she's done other things, but those are the films I'm familiar with. Bob Hoskins is in this film as Bill Nelson. It's like her surrogate father. He's also works for this police force that she works for. Emma Cleesby plays Catherine Sinclair, her mother, who we only see briefly in the beginning of the film. Sean Pertwee plays Dr. Talbot. We just spoke about him in my review for The Reckoning. He's worked with Neil Marshall. This is his second time if you go in the progression of his career. Craig Conway plays Saul. He also worked with Neil Marshall on Dog Soldiers briefly in the beginning of the film, and he was one of the crawlers in The Descent. And he's fantastic as Saul here. And Malcolm McDowell shows up as Kane. And Malcolm McDowell is always a welcome addition to any cast. And pretty much if I had to describe this film before we get into the review is, and I just described this to my buddy Dale. He had never seen it. And I described it to him like this. It's a mishmash of Escape from New York, Mad Max, 28 Days Later, Excalibur, and you could throw a little bit of The Warriors in there as well. And that's pretty much Doomsday. And this is pretty much a love letter to those films. Absolutely. And you can see definitely Carpenter and George Miller influenced this film big time. And you can see those sprinkled throughout the film. Matter of fact, just in the beginning of the film, the font and the title credit sequence in the beginning of the film, right out of a Carpenter film. Even the score at this point is very synth-like, Carpenter-esque. And I know Neil Marshall. I've read interviews with him, and he's a big Carpenter fan. And pretty much this film starts off in 2008 in Glasgow, Scotland, or in Scotland, period. And we see there's this virus. We have Malcolm McDowell is narrating this sequence, like he's talking over it. And he's saying about how this virus called the Reaper virus is reaping its way across the countryside. And pretty much we see people, their skin starts bubbling and it's getting deformed. And I said 28 days later, people don't go crazy and start killing people. They just get sick and they die. And they set up how there is no cure for it. If you get it, it's a death sentence. And there's pandemonium in Scotland. And England's going to seal off Scotland from the rest of the world. They're going to wall them in with this 30-foot high wall and put snipers on it to kill anybody who even tries to get to the wall. And we see little Eden with her mother, and they're trying to get out. And the military opens fire on these people because the people start beating the shit out of the military because they're scared and they want to get out of Scotland, getting away from the threat. And Eden gets hit in the eye, and her mom patches it up with like a scarf to stop the bleeding. And she sees this military helicopter off some yards off in the distance, and she runs over and says, "Please take my daughter." And this one soldier kindly gets off and tells his soldier buddies to take the little girl, and he gets off with the mother, and the mother gets left behind, and she gets taken out of the country. And we fast forward to 2035, and we're reintroduced to Eden. Now she works for the police force or the military in England, and we see her on a job, and afterwards we see her meeting up with Bill, Bob Hoskins' character, and we see how they have like a father-daughter relationship. And they're talking about what's going on in the world, and we see that all of a sudden another different police unit finds infected people in London, and they thought they were good, but now the Reaper virus is back, and now it's in London. And now the government's panicking because it's going to tear through London and the whole country. And they don't know what to do at first. And they realize they bring Eden in because they want her and a team to go into Scotland because their satellites have shown that there's people alive over there. So they assume that either Kane is still alive, Malcolm McDowell's character, because he was left in Scotland when they sealed it up. He was a doctor doing research on how to find a vaccine for it. And they wanted her to go over to see if he's still alive and how these people have survived because they figured everybody was dead. And that's pretty much it. She goes in with this team, and once they get to Glasgow, Scotland, the setup for this movie, I love it, absolutely. And the way Neil Marshall shoots it and shows what's going on, I absolutely love it. He brings in all the players, the government officials, what their thoughts are, the political aspects of it. And then them going, once they get to Glasgow, this movie is pretty much nonstop action till the end of the film. We find out that there's people still alive in Glasgow, and they survive by being cannibals. And we meet Saul. He's the leader of this gang, and they're dressed in leather and tattoos and piercings. It's like the Warriors and Mad Max mashed into one. And there's, because Sinclair and Dr. Talbot get captured by them, and they have this action sequence, and they get captured, and some of their team get killed. Two of their soldiers are named Carpenter and Miller, obviously a loving homage to John Carpenter and George Miller. And they bring Dr. Talbot out, and it's kind of like a concert. Saul comes out and gives his speech, and there's music playing, people are dancing around. And they bring Dr. Talbot out in like the back of this, like half of this back of this tow truck, and they lower him on and they cook him alive over this spit. And this butcher comes out and starts cutting pieces of meat off him and feeding it to the crowd. It's bizarre, it's effed up, and it's glorious for the movie we're dealing with. And then we cut from Mad Max and Warriors territory to Excalibur, because Sinclair has to find Kane, and his daughter was captured by Saul, which Saul ends up being her brother and Kane's son, but they're feuding because Saul knows that Kane's been lying to everybody, saying there's nothing on the other side of the wall, and Saul's been convinced this whole time that there's still, people alive on the other side of the wall. So the daughter takes them to Kane, living in this castle, and Sinclair has to duel with this guy in armor, like knight armor, and she kills him, and they escape, and we get our final chase sequence. Sinclair delivers this girl to the government so they can use her blood to get a vaccine going, and she stays behind because she wants to, go to where she grew up. And at the end of the film, we see this last shot of her with the rest. Because Saul gets killed, she kills Saul and some of the other gang members, but she shows up with the gang at the end of the film, basically like she's going to become their leader, and that's the end of Doomsday. And there's a lot more stuff in there. I glossed over a lot of stuff. This film is just fun. If you're a genre fan and you like any of the movies I mentioned that this film plays homage to, you're going to enjoy this film. I remember when I saw it back in 2008, I had a smile on my face the whole time, and I still enjoy the hell out of this film. I just watched it again last night. I really enjoy this film. Neil Marshall shoots it nicely. The actors are doing really good work here. I like the story, the mishmash of genres. Now, I will say, there's a couple things that bring the score down in this film just a little bit. Some of the action scenes are cut a little too quick. I hate quick cutting action where you can't tell. And there's a few moments in this movie where Marshall cuts a little too fast, and it's hard to tell what's going on. But overall, he does a great job directing this film. I mean, it's really well shot, and some of the action is very exciting and well done. A lot of practical explosions, a lot of practical effects, a lot of makeup effects. It's very gory as hell. And the other thing that drags down a little bit is once we hit Glasgow, like I said, the pace of the movie picks up. And it's like a runaway train to the end of the film, which is a good thing. But we're jumping genres very fast, and it gets a little sloppy. So it brings it down just a little bit for me. But overall, I think this movie is a hell of a fun time. I highly recommend it if you like the films I've listed here. I would give Doomsday an 8 out of 10. I love this film. I just think those couple of bits bring it down just a little bit. It's not Neil Marshall's best film, but it's a fun time. I can't say fun enough. 8 out of 10 for Doomsday. Have you ever seen this film? Leave a comment down below. Let me know. Hit the thumbs up. Hit the subscribe button. Share this video. I greatly would appreciate that. I hope everyone has a great weekend out there. I'll be back next week with my review for The Enforcer, the next Dirty Harry installment on our trip down Dirty Harry Way. And other than that, I hope everyone has a great weekend. I'll see you next week, and I'll leave you with bye.